Hey guys, so Go 1.24 should be released sometime this month in February 2025. There's a lot of interesting things happening with this release, and there's like three specific features that were pretty interesting to me, and I want to talk about them in this video. For that, I'm going to reference this blog that is pretty cool, and I'm going to share this in the description below. So the first feature is generic aliases, and Go always had aliases, but in this release, we're going to be able to do aliases for generics. And a good example is this one here. So essentially, we can create a set or an alias called set for essentially what is a set, a map of generic type of bool. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's essentially you can create aliases for generic types. The second feature, which is weak pointers, and this one is very interesting. And essentially, the best way I can describe this is in Go, normal pointers, when you run the garbage collector on them, they don't get like deleted or collected. With weak pointers, they get collected. And the best way I can describe this is by showing you this small diagram here. So basically, a weak pointer points at a kind of an address, which is 8 bytes, and that address connects to or like points to the actual data you care about. That's how weak pointers work. Now, when you run the garbage collector on it, what happens is the garbage collector will just set this thing here to nil or empty it essentially, and then that will kind of disconnect the pointing thing from the weak pointer to the data itself. It's like there's something in between, unlike the normal pointers. And if we want to look at the test of the implementation for this weak pointers, so I'm now in the Go docs. If we look at one of those tests, you'll notice a couple things. So here they're creating a weak pointer using weak.pointers, and they're passing in a generic type. So by default, it should be 0 because the memory address is pretty much empty. You haven't pointed to anything yet. But then here we create a new weak pointer, or we create a kind of a new type of whatever that type is, generic type, and then we create a new pointer, a weak pointer that points to it. Now we're saying that the value should be equal because it's a weak pointer pointing to that value. When we run the garbage collector first time, notice that it's not empty just yet, and that's one important thing about weak pointers. It is not very consistent. You're not guaranteed that it's going to be emptied or garbage collected right away. It will at some point, but it's not right away. Notice here that the first time they run the garbage collector, the test says it is not just empty just yet. We run it one more time, and then the value will be equal to nil. So that's the thing about weak pointers. It's very useful for like caching. If you have like big objects that you want to cache and then eventually kind of empty, that would be something very useful to use with like weak pointers. The last thing I want to talk about would be the omit zeros. This is super cool. If you ever done any like marshalling and unmarshalling for like JSON objects, you've probably used this omit empty. And if we run this code quickly, notice that we have this time.time in here. And if we run this omit empty on it, what happens is we default to like whatever the empty value of this date is. It is not really removing it, it's just giving you a default value. So now we have this new thing called omit zero. And if we run this code, which is uses that omit zero thing, notice that it gives us null or nil. So that would be super useful, for example, whenever using time. So when it's empty, you don't just pass in zeros, you pass in nil, which is what the thing you're expecting from it. Yeah, so these are the three main features that were really highlighted to me. There's a lot more things happening here. So there's this JSON output for your tests. So now you can, if you run go test-JSON, you see the output as like a JSON formatted. You can probably create some tools that kind of parse these things and give you some nice visuals. And yeah, a lot of other different improvements. But these three main features that are really kind of interesting to me: weak pointers, generic aliases, and the omit zeros. Yeah, so hope you liked this quick video, and I'll talk to you soon.